Welcome back. This is the second lecture on ancient hedonism. I talked about Epicurus, and many of you probably recognize that Epicurus's name has come down to us as Epicureanism. But some of the irony there is the way we use the word Epicurean, an Epicurean is a person who goes in for just the right, perfect physical pleasure, especially in regard to foods. We'll speak of a person who is an Epicurean or goes in for Epicurean delights, goes to the very expensive restaurants, the kind of restaurants that I can't actually enjoy. I mean, when I know that I'm paying $100 for a meal, I can't taste it. So it's lost on me. The irony is that Epicurus himself, remember, says that the good life is a simple life, a life free from pain in the body and trouble in the mind. He did not emphasize perfect food. Epicureanism as a doctrine, though, continued for hundreds of years after his life. We even see a little reference to it in the New Testament when Paul says, if there is no resurrection, we might as well eat, drink, and be merry. That's a Epicurean slogan. But I want to talk about an Epicurean 200 years after Epicurus as the movement continues, or the philosophical school continues. And he's not a Greek, he's now a Roman. So we're going to talk about Lucretius. He lives 94 to 55 BC, so he's 200 years after Epicurus. He's not living in Greece, he's living in Rome. The social situation has changed. He's not part of a Greek city-state that is oppressed by others, but he's part of the late Roman Republic that is on the verge of becoming an empire, a change of government. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Lucretius is a follower of Epicurus. He thinks the good life is a life of pleasure, the wise pursuit of pleasure, and he has some observations that help us get a fuller understanding of ancient Epicureanism. First of all, he wants you to think about religion. And in order to understand the reading, the little quotation that I'm going to read to you, imagine a man or a small group of men who are on the run. And they're on the run for a good reason. They've committed some terrible crime. So let's take perhaps the worst crime, treason. Here are people who have committed treason against their country, and they've been caught. They didn't get away with it. So they're on the run. They're fleeing persecution. And as we would say, the wanted posters are out. So the announcements have spread around the countryside. If we find these people, we want them. So imagine them. They are guilty. They know they are guilty. They know their country is after them. They know they're going to be executed as soon as they're caught. What do? From the Epicurean point of view, remember how Epicurus adopted Democritus's atomism. He said a human being is simply a clump of atoms. Once you die, nobody can, even the gods, if they exist, cannot hurt you. Why don't these men? Listen to what he says. These same men, exiled from their country and banished far from the sight of men, stained with some foul crime, beset with every kind of care, live on just the same, and in spite of all, to whatever place they come in their misery, they make sacrifice to the dead and slaughter black cattle and dispatch offerings to the gods of the dead, and in their bitter plight far more keenly turn their hearts to religion. The mask is torn off and the truth remains behind. These exiles who are guilty and deserve it don't do the obvious thing. They don't commit suicide. They live on just the same. Why? Because of religion. They're scared that the gods are going to get them. Now remember, Epicurus adopted a materialist worldview, and here Lucretius is going with his materialist worldview, and he's looking at people and he's saying, this is what religion is really about. Fear. I said in the earlier lecture on Epicurus that sometimes George Fox students say about their materialists' friends that they don't understand. How could you live in a world where there's no belief in God and no hope? But here is what their materialist friends say about them. I can't believe you would live in a world where you think God is always looking over your shoulder. He's going to zap you if you kiss your boyfriend with too much enthusiasm. Religion's all about fear, fear, fear. Now, I think, and from personal experience, I would say, this is a gross misunderstanding of religion. But it's a question for you. How do you understand? How do you experience religion? Is it all about fear of the gods who are going to get you after you die? Or is it about something more positive, something good? Lucretius has a different observation, not about religion, but about what I would call the rat race, or we might call meaninglessness. So this, now remember, he's describing a upper class, wealthy Roman. And he says about him, the man who is tired of staying at home often goes out abroad from his great mansion, and of a sudden returns again, for indeed abroad he feels no better. He goes out, he comes back. He's not happy. Now, that going out might be going to the restaurant, or it might be going across the sea on a vacation. He doesn't feel any better when he comes back. And then he races to his country house. He's wealthy, he has 2 houses. He races to his country house, furiously driving his ponies as though he were hurrying to bring help to a burning house. He yawns at once when he has set foot on the threshold of the villa, or sinks into a heavy sleep and seeks forgetfulness, or even in hot haste makes for town, eager to be back. In this way, each man struggles to escape himself. This was written in the century before Christ, and yet it describes the frantic lifestyle of those who we say have FOMO, fear of missing out. It seems to me that the ancient Epicurean Lucretius has put his finger on an important aspect of human living. Remember, he's just saying, Epicurus says, and Lucretius says, the good life is a life of pleasure. But pleasure is not to be found in the things that come from the outside. In this way, each man struggles to escape himself. Now, this has been a little side trip through ancient hedonism. I'm certainly not trying to make anybody into a hedonist. And as a theory of ethics, I think hedonism is wrong. It's limited because the ancient hedonists say what you ought to do is just look out for pleasure for you and your friends. There is no civic political vision. And that's partly because of the historical situation. Remember, we said that Epicurus lives after Aristotle. He lives after the Greek city-states have lost their independence. So he's living in a world where all of the big decisions are made a long way away. And so his advice is, don't worry about politics. Don't worry about commerce. Just live a quiet, happy life in your small circle. And that is a temptation to some of us, because we think all of the big decisions are made 3,000 miles away on the other coast. So we can sympathize with the Epicureans. But when they say, you have no real duty to your community. It's just to your small group. That seems to be lacking a great deal. Nevertheless, they give us insights into real pleasure. Pleasure does not come from going to the latest show, trying to escape yourself. Pleasure comes from within, from contentment. And I've pointed out some of the attractions of a materialist worldview. You don't have to fear the gods, and death is nothing because you cease to exist. But that, as soon as you say that, it points to the limitations of a materialist worldview. It really means that death is the end and there's nothing to be hoped for after that. We're going to move on to utilitarianism and modern ethical theories, beginning with the next lecture.